This took place when I was 10 years old at my local Chuck E. Cheese's. My mom had promised to take me as I had gotten all A's on my report card, and every time I did, I'd get a prize or some sort of outing. I've been to Chuck E. Cheese my whole life, and every kid knows it was their hangout spot. At the time, my family and I had been tight on money, so my mom agreed to take me, but that we couldn't go over the $50 limit. While it was a sucky situation, I didn't care about the money and just wanted to have fun. I remember my mom sitting down at one of the booths waiting for our pizza and giving me tokens to go play some games. I had been playing skee-ball, the typical old but gold game. As I'm playing, one of the balls I had fell on the floor when I see an arm pick it up. As I look up, I see a man standing in front of me while handing over the ball. He wore a white shirt, black pants, and an obviously fake Rolex on his wrist. To be honest, he looked like a dad, and I kinda thought he was at first. He introduced himself as Robert and asked if I was alone. When I tell him I wasn't, he immediately says that he enjoyed skee-ball as well and wondered if he could join me. I give him a friendly smile, giving him the hint that I didn't want to talk to him as I took the whole stranger danger thing seriously. He then says, "You know, my son enjoys this game as well. Let's go play with him. He's right over there." He then proceeds to grab my hand and sort of nudge me to follow him. However, something in my gut told me not to go with him no matter how innocent he might have seemed. He tried slightly tugging me, but I just kept resisting, making it clear that I didn't want to go with him. This thankfully got the attention of people, which made the man start to get nervous. One of the bystanders had yelled out for him to let me go. One bystander turned into another one, and then another one, which ended up becoming a whole scene. At this point, multiple staff and police had rushed over. This made him finally let go, and he then tries to run toward the exit doors where he was eventually caught by police. I see this man trying to resist arrest to the point where he eventually got tased. The sound of his crazed screams will forever be burned into my mind as he laid down being put in handcuffs. My mom had taken me away where she had spoken to the police and the head manager. Turns out, this wasn't the first time he's ever done this before. He's actually done this to several other kids and had even managed to take off with a few. Before you ask, yes, the kids were apparently found and safe. The Chuck E. Cheese had apologized for the situation and even offered a full refund. However, my mom wasn't having it, practically shielding me as we left the building. My mom was extra cautious with me for the next few years until I could learn to fend for myself. Needless to say, we never returned to that Chuck E. Cheese again. This just goes to show you how Chuck E. Cheese isn't always a place where a kid can be a kid. So, I've worked at Chuck E. Cheese for almost 4 years now as a standard cast member. It's a pretty fun job overall, with the exception of moderate chaos at birthday parties and management. Every week, there were different managers, some good and some bad, so it really depends on who you get. Other than that, it was decently reasonable. Throughout these 4 years, I had dealt with many different kids and seen some stuff you wouldn't see at any other establishment. But this experience takes the prize. One day, some of our staff had been let go for reasons I won't go into, leaving us with a skeleton staff. This basically meant that there were barely enough employees to fully operate the center. While we may have been short-staffed, It had been a relatively slow day, which certainly reduced some stress. It was around closing time, and so we all had to clean up everything in a span of an hour. Now, this was around the time where COVID was still in its prime, so all staff was required to sanitize everything in the store. This included stuff like games, tables, counters, and even parts of the animatronics. After sanitizing and sweeping most things, I head into the back room where all of the animatronics were. Upon approaching the room, I immediately noticed that the door leading into the room was slightly opened. This was weird, as both my manager and I were the only two people on site that had access to this room. I had assumed she had just maybe went in for something and forgot to lock it. As I walk inside, I begin to notice that the animatronics had seemed to have been tampered with. Assuming that they had to have been misplaced by my manager or something, I begin wiping them down while listening to my music. As I'm cleaning the inside of Chucky's head, I look to my right and sitting down is a man giving me a dead stare. I call for my manager, frantically screaming that there's someone in the back room. The man then slowly gets up and proceeds to forcefully put his hand over my mouth. Being a 5'7", 140-pound girl, I couldn't escape his grasp no matter how hard I tried. It then came to a point where he leaned in and said that if I didn't stop, that he'd kill me. I try my best to calm down while bawling my eyes out, not knowing what he was gonna do next. My manager, along with the outside security guard we have, entered the room. The security guard draws his gun, demanding he let me go and to put his hands up. He complies, and I nearly run straight into my manager's arms while hugging her. Our well-fit security escorts him out of the center, where police were then called. It turns out that this man had gotten a hold of a spare key in our office area when it was unattended. There were also high amounts of zinc phosphide found in the suits. It's a very dangerous rat poison and can be toxic to humans if breathed in or consumed. I could only assume his plan was to attempt to poison the staff who wore the suits. To make matters worse, he was also found with a large knife in his back pocket. It was that night where I quit right then and swore never to return, and my manager politely understood. However, I still have several remaining questions as to what had happened. How did nobody see him get a key? What were his intentions? And what would he have done had the security not been there? It still gives me goosebumps till this day. My name is Ron, and I've been an electrician for about 30 plus years now. What I do is basically repair any electrical errors that may occur in several establishments. These establishments ranged anywhere from schools all the way to malls. It's a pretty chill job for the most part if you knew what you were doing, but other than that, I enjoyed it very much. Throughout my years of work, I've never really had any sort of abnormal encounters, but that all changed in just one evening. One day, our company had received a call from a Chuck E. Cheese reporting an issue with a few of their lights. On that day, I was scheduled to go in and fix them, which shouldn't be too much of a problem as lights were my specialty. I arrive at the Chuck E. Cheese, which had been closed due to a staff-only meeting. After inspecting the lights, I go inside the ceiling trying to figure out if there was something in the ceiling causing the issue. Being a big guy and going into small spaces was really uncomfortable, especially if you were in a rush. I'd say a minute after of getting this feeling, I hear what sounded like footsteps coming from across the ceiling. I shine my light in the dark, empty ceiling, only to find nothing. At first I thought that it might have been some sort of animal, considering this was next to a wildlife preserve where this was home to unwanted critters. So there I am, attempting to repair the issue when I hear it clear as day, the laugh of a small child echoing through the dark. However, the only problem was that I couldn't see anyone or anything, even with my flashlight. There was seemingly nobody inside this ceiling but me. I ended up repairing the lights and packed up my equipment and got the hell out of there. On my way out, I tried my best to forget about what I had just heard and to focus on what's next. I didn't bother saying anything to the staff or anyone at my job for that matter, thinking they'd see me as crazy. But then again, can you blame them? Till this day, I'm still unsure what it exactly was that I heard, but fear was not enough to describe what I felt. To be honest, I don't know what I felt. It was sort of a mix of fear, confusion, and panic. While I didn't talk about this with many people, I did speak to my friend who claims that it was all in my head. However, I was certain it was not. This happened when I was 9 years old at a Chuck E. Cheese for my best friend's birthday party. We'll call him Matthew. Every kid around my age held their birthday party at this place, so it wasn't a surprise to me. We were celebrating his 8th birthday with all the fun activities us kids would enjoy. All of the adults had created various types of games to keep the kids occupied. These games ranged anywhere from tag to hide and seek, so the majority of us enjoyed playing. Around halfway through the party, we were up in the play area playing hide and seek when we hear the main doors smash open. 2 armed men with masks enter, drawing their guns at the woman working behind the counter. Right away, some of the kids begin to cry, while the parents had tried to shield them. As I'm up in one of those tubes with the windows, I hear one of them demand the woman to give them the register. I watched as one of them pointed his gun at her while she handed them the register. The other intruder proceeds to stand by, watching the parents and kids to make sure nobody got out. Being only 9, I still thought it was safe to stay up here and to not make any movement. Needless to say, they did end up leaving the building, where police had arrived minutes later. The Chuck E. Cheese had to be evacuated after, and the party was then moved to my friend's house.